Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Sex education isn't required teaching in Indiana, so a number of school systems have turned to outside organizations for help.
Sexual health is really about communication and healthy relationships. It's about keeping your body safe.
Monroe County schools have partnered with IU Health to start teaching sex ed in the 5th grade. A group in Washington called Comforting Hearts has come together to build a handicap-accessible playground.
We can't go to parks because I can barely do anything. I just have to watch my sister and play.
The group hopes to have the playground completed next summer. And Senator Mike Braun announced this week he was running for governor. Ahead, we talk with an expert about what that means for the political landscape in the state. We'll have these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. More than 80% of Hoosiers believe an abortion ban should have at least some exceptions, and more than half say abortion should be legal in most cases. Brandon Smith reports those are results from the Indiana Public Broadcasting Ball State Hoosier Survey.
About 78% of those polled say abortion should be legal in cases of rape or incest, and 62% say it should be legal if the fetus is likely to be born with severe disabilities or health problems. Indiana Republican lawmakers passed a ban this year that allows abortions only in some cases of rape or incest, and the law permits abortion if the fetus can't survive outside the womb. Some conservatives want the state to restrict abortion further, but Ball State political scientist Chad Kinsella says given these poll numbers, that's a tough sell.
It could be politically, a political landmine if it's big if, capital IF, if they go that route.
Kinsella also notes that nearly half of those polled say they wouldn't vote for a candidate whose abortion views were different from theirs. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
Indiana is one of 18 states that doesn't require schools to teach sex education to students. But if a school does teach sex education, the state mandates teaching about HIV and AIDS with emphasis on abstinence. With limited time and guidance, some districts turn to outside groups to help tackle the subject. Benta Boutier reports.
It's Olivia Cosgray's 4th day with the 7th grade class at Northview Middle School teaching sex education. The school brings her in through the nonprofit LifeSmart Youth to provide instruction. Today is set aside to teach about STIs and STDs. And with the future of abortion access up in the air, she's more convinced than ever students need comprehensive sex education.
It makes you want to work harder and push harder and try and make people realize how important this is.
Class opened with a word scramble, then a worksheet asking kids to match STIs and STDs with their characteristics. They watched a video about HIV and AIDS. She answered questions that run the gamut of, can I get HIV from sitting on a toilet seat, to how to know when to get tested.
Sometimes they get really wacky questions, but even those questions are really important because if it's in their brain, it's something they're wondering about, so they need a factual answer to it.
LifeSmart Youth sends teachers to 9 counties across the state. The curriculum is abstinence-based, but they cover topics like puberty with 4th to 6th graders, moving into STD and STI prevention, and healthy relationships with older students. Indiana has the 14th highest teen birth rate in the country. STDs and STIs are on the rise, including in Indiana, and the state's Youth Risk Behavior Survey reports condom use is declining among young people. Tammy Carter says more than 31% of Indiana high schoolers report being sexually active.
And so we could talk about abstinence, but if the train has already left the station, it's a little bit late. And we have to be very vigilant about teaching young people how to protect themselves.
Her organization is not the only resource schools seek to provide students with information. The Monroe County School Corporation partners with IU Health for sex education curriculum. They start education on puberty with 5th graders and progress in topics through middle school and 10th grade health class. Becky Rose says the partnership helps teachers access more in-depth information, and they put an emphasis on healthy communication throughout the curriculum.
We know that healthy relationships and communication are extremely valuable skills for our children as they move through their life. And sexual health is really about communication and healthy relationships. It's about keeping your body safe, keeping your body healthy.
It's tough to fit lessons in while keeping up with other classroom instruction, but she says kids need information year to year to respond to changing needs.
We know there's a lot out there right now that kids can stumble upon that may not be the best accurate information or the healthiest information. And so it's really been just extremely successful and helpful that we have IU Health as a partner to be able to help provide that accurate information.
The number of Indiana teachers who report teaching health consequences of early pregnancy, STDs, and STIs has gone down, though the CDC says most Indiana secondary schools teach some sex education. Cosgray has about 45 minutes to get through teaching about 6 STIs and STDs. On her final day, she talks with the class about healthy relationships. One 7th grader asked her what to do if one person wants to wear a condom during sex and the other does not.
And I'm like, do you think that's a conversation that people would have to have? And like, what if they can't come to an agreement? What do you think they should do? And she's like, probably not have sex. I'm like, yeah, probably not have sex.
LifeSmart Youth is evaluating ways to expand its programming to more schools. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ben Taboutier.
A 2018 Indiana law requires schools send home a form so parents can opt their students out of sex education if they want. What does at-will employment mean for Indiana's workers? Are there any alternatives? Some viewers wanted to know, but as Indiana Public Broadcasting's Adam Yaha-Reyes reports, at-will gives Indiana employers the right to fire any worker for almost any reason.
Indianapolis employment attorney Amber Boyd-Mormon says a lot of people come to her when they think they've been unfairly fired.
I have to go through the dialogue of, well, they can do this, they can do unfair things, they just can't do illegal practices.
At-will is common across U.S. states, but some have more exceptions than others. Generally, an employer can't fire someone for refusing to break the law, unionizing, or for their race, gender, or religion.
The major exception was the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. You can dismiss for any reason, but not for joining or supporting a union.
If a firing crosses the line, the employee must prove it. In non-at-will jurisdictions, the burden of proof is more shared.
Most of the industrial world recognizes that employees, once they're past the probationary period, have a right not to be dismissed except for good or just cause.
There have been attempts to change at-will law in Indiana and beyond, but so far, none have been successful. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Adam Yaha-Reyes.
Mormon says that people should document both good and bad developments like positive performance reviews and complaints to HR of unfair treatment, and she recommends those things are saved on personal, not only company devices. Well, we're joined now by Holden Absher for more headlines from around the state. Hello, Holden.
Thank you, Joe. Catalent Pharma Solutions is laying off about 400 employees at its Bloomington location. According to an internally circulated email, both temporary and full-time employees will be affected, mostly in operations. A Catalent spokesperson said that the decision was based off the current phase of the pandemic, the challenging global economic environment, and the need to operate efficiently. Catalent is the second largest employer in Bloomington after Indiana University. Governor Eric Holcomb's major economic development initiative, the Ready Grant program, looks set for another major influx of funding. Pat Bean reports.
The governor created the Ready Grants in 2021 as a way to help generate public and private investment in local economic development. Its first round of funding, $500 million, came from the Biden administration's stimulus package, the American Rescue Plan. House Speaker Todd Houston says he wants another $500 million in the upcoming state budget.
Using ready funding and other tools, we can work with our local partners to ensure more communities have housing options to meet the needs of today and the future.
Senate Democratic leader Greg Taylor says the Republican-led legislature has spent too much time cutting taxes for businesses and not enough on ensuring the state has an adequate workforce.
Adequately fund K through 12 education, start children in school at age 5 instead of 7, and we'll see the benefits from that across the state of Indiana, and businesses will benefit.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Pat Bean.
The new session at the State House begins in January. A group of Bloomington businesses, including Sprout Box and Soma Coffee House, is on its way to renovating the 100-year-old Showers Kiln downtown. And the first phase of renovation will start within several months and include renovating the existing first floor. The second phase is expected within several years and will include building additional floors. The kiln was originally part of the Showers Brother furniture complex, and it consisted of 5 large ovens that dried lumber before being milled into furniture. Monroe County Council unanimously supported a Capital Improvement Board, or CIB, to expand the convention center. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton's administration last week released a list of 15 changes it wants before signing on to that plan. Councilmember Jeff McKim says that discussions with the city will continue.
There are some legitimate issues raised in the city memo that we need to consider, just not in this resolution.
One issue that caught the eye of several council members is the city's request to have 2 appointments to the Convention and Visitors Commission. State law gives county governments authority to appoint those members. The Monroe County Democratic Party filed a recount petition this week in the District 62 House race between Dave Hall, a Republican, and Penny Githens, a Democrat. After provisional ballots were added to the totals earlier this month, Hall is leading Githens by just 40 votes. The petition asks for a recount in all 43 precincts across Brown, Jackson, and Monroe counties to account for the possibility of human error in counties like Monroe and Brown, which rely on paper ballots. The recount is expected to be done by December 20th. Despite challenges like increased input costs and a hot summer, harvests across Indiana ended up being profitable for many farmers. Clayton Baumgarth has this report.
The price of fertilizer and diesel weighed down what could have been another record year in agriculture. The state saw crop yields vary greatly between regions thanks to diverse weather patterns. And harvest ranged from the best crops some farmers have ever had to others having their worst year yet.
Well, you had decent yields and good prices. Those two generally don't go along together, but that's kind of helped mend the fence and got us through the year.
The war in the Ukraine was a big factor in the price of production and crops. Russia is a major producer of fertilizer in the world market, and sanctions have caused a sharp decline in supply. The cost of diesel has also been heavily affected by the war. Purdue and University of Illinois experts are predicting the next harvest to break even for many. But Cron noted that grain prices are expected to decrease. While that may mean 2023 could be difficult, Cron remains optimistic.
I had somebody ask me the other day, said, "You're always optimistic." I said, "Yeah, I think you ask most farmers. Next year will always be better." And that's part of why you have to have that attitude to be able to do that.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
If diesel and fertilizer costs manage to drop, Joe, next year could be another record harvest, just like in 2021.
Holden, thank you very much. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Senator Mike Braun announced he's running for governor in Indiana, and that means his seat in Congress will be up for grabs in 2024. And we visit the Yoho General store in Salisbury, which is celebrating its 10th year renovation anniversary. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
Public television's mission is to create a more informed and engaged public with inspiring programs, compelling stories, and trustworthy news. And we can't do it without a team of professional journalists, media specialists, engineers, and administrators making it happen both on the air and behind the scenes. Want to work for WTIU? Find the latest job postings on our website. Details at WTIU.org/jobs.
Life is full of choices, and right now your favorite member benefit, Passport, is offering more choices for you to stream.
Welcome to the club.
It's a beautiful thing. With cooking.
I gotta let it cook, but I keep wanting to smell it.
Travel.
And here we are.
Documentaries.
I realized I could change the world.
and so much more. The choice is yours with Passport on the PBS Video app.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana U.S. Senator Mike Braun filed paperwork with the state Tuesday to run for governor in 2024. Braun is in the middle of his first term in the U.S. Senate. Now, prior to that, the Jasper Republican was a state legislator for 3 years and served a decade on a local school board. The race will be wide open with current Governor Eric Holcomb term limited. We're joined now by Andy Downs, a political analyst from Fort Wayne and former director of the Mike Downs Center for Indiana Politics. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thank you.
So if Braun ran for another term in the Senate, you just figure he would easily win re-election. Why make the run for governor?
We have to remember Mike Braun is a CEO. He's somebody who's used to being at the top of the hierarchy and being able to move organizations in a particular direction. When you're a member of the Senate, it's an elite group. There are only 100, but you're not the leader of it. Even if you are the majority leader, there are limits to what you can and cannot do. And I think it's been pretty clear from the beginning that Mike Braun is somebody who likes to be able to move organizations in the direction he wants them to go. That means being an executive, and the governor's the chief executive of the state.
Now, he's the biggest name to announce for governor. Who else do you think might run for the GOP nomination?
Well, we already know Eric Doden is in the race, and he's raised a couple of $1 million. So he's a serious candidate, somebody who cannot be ignored. The other name that always has to be mentioned when you're talking about gubernatorial races is Lieutenant Governor, in this case, Suzanne Crouch. She certainly is somebody who should be respected as a possible candidate for the office. Beyond that, it becomes a bit more speculation. I think there probably were some people waiting to see what Mike Braun would do. And now that he's made his decision to run for governor, there might be some people who just decided to run for Senate instead of governor.
Former Secretary of Education Jennifer McCormick looks like she might run for the Democratic nomination. Have you heard of anyone else? And does a Democrat even have a chance in the state?
Well, McCormick is the name that's been coming up the most. Obviously, there will be some other names that come up. There might be some people who actually go back in time and look for somebody like a Joe Donnelly, or maybe even a little further back, a John Gregg, and say, well, why not ask them to do it? Some people might try to convince Pete Buttigieg that it's time for him to run for governor. So there are some names out there, but the only person who seems to be exploring it seriously is Jennifer McCormick. The chances of winning, though, we always have to start with the assumption that every race is winnable. Some are just a lot harder to win than others. This one will be an uphill climb for the Democrats, absolutely no doubt about it. When you look at how Eric Holcomb did in 2020, it was a very easy victory for him. When you look at what happened in the Senate race just earlier this year, that was a very easy win for Todd Young. This is a time when Republicans do quite well running statewide.
So what does this mean for Braun's Senate seat? Who might go after that seat? Will it be in play for Democrats?
Well, that seat, anytime there's an open seat, both parties think they have a shot at it. And obviously they do. We reelect incumbents at an unbelievably high rate. And so when it's an open seat, both parties suddenly realize there's at least a better chance than there had been. In terms of who might run for it, that's a long list of people. Some of the names that have come up already are Victoria Spartz, Jim Banks. There also are other people, maybe Todd Rokita, and some folks who we're not talking about just yet. But really what had to happen first was Mike Braun had to say, I'm not running for that seat. Once the Democrats start to get a feel for who will be in the Republican field, there may be a few Democrats who say, wait a minute, I think I like my chances now, because in the Republican field, maybe they're running too far to the right. Maybe there are too many names for people to choose from, which will cause a fracture in the party. So, Democrats may end up reacting a little bit to what the Republicans do.
Andy, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
A support group in Washington is raising funds to get a new playground built that will be suitable for kids of all abilities. Dave Foster of WVUT in Vincennes has this story.
This is Katie Hunt. She's 8 years old and lives in Washington and attends Washington Community Intermediate School just across from Longfellow Park. As you can see, she uses a wheelchair. She just wants to be able to play with her sister.
We can't go to parks because I can barely do anything. I just have to watch my sister and play.
Katie lives with segmental spinal dysgenesis, a rare spinal abnormality giving her different abilities than most. Her mom, April, founded a support group in Washington for families with special needs. It's called Comforting Hearts, and they had their first meeting in March. And it was at that meeting the discussion was started about a new playground in the city of Washington.
She can't roll around too much on the mulch and rock whenever there's playgrounds, and when we get there, the equipment is not suitable. We have really nice parks in our town. It's just that there's not anything that's all-inclusive for children of all abilities.
Soon, the Comforting Hearts group morphed into a movement to build an all-inclusive playground. Longfellow Park does have a playground that is ADA accessible according to the American with Disabilities Act. However, as families like the Hunts learn, ADA compliant does not always mean accessible or all-inclusive.
She struggles with the mulch. She would not be able to get up in the jungle gym. She would not be able to go over to the swings. She would not be able to get into the chair over there.
This is Christina McCullum Davis and her daughter, Tala. They are part of the Comforting Hearts group. Christina serves as the group secretary. Tala is also in a wheelchair and has one of the most severe forms of muscular dystrophy known as Walker-Warburg syndrome. It affects the muscles, brain, and eyes. Tala also cannot experience play at most parks. She needs assistance to get to the equipment and then cannot interact with it.
For Tala, she really isn't able to do anything as far as physically. She is very fully dependent on me. So I have to use my hands to help her play and touch and feel things. So it's very important for her, because she needs full body support, to be able to stay in her wheelchair, to be able to swing in like a wheelchair accessible chair.
And since Tala is also visually impaired, she needs sensory options while at play.
Things that make sound, something that she can touch and feel, things that have different textures on it. It's really important for her to be able to experience the world, because she doesn't experience the world like we do.
In a letter to community leaders seeking support for the all-inclusive playground, Comforting Hearts explains that it's widely documented that non-inclusive recreational facilities increase the segregation of kids with disabilities, adding to the negative stigma they suffer. Comforting Hearts did their research and solicited and obtained bids. It was no surprise for those who live in disability world that the cost is much higher for equipment and material when they're labeled special needs.
Because it has to do with different abilities, anything that has to do with a child with different abilities or an adult, you're paying twice as much. So the playground is going to cost us more just because we have to fit it for every child.
Some of the specific plans include an all-accessible playground gym where a child in a wheelchair, walker, or crutches can enter the gym. Sensory objects will be located throughout for those with autism and hearing and vision issues. There'll be a teeter-totter where a child with different abilities can sit in the middle to experience the sensation while others on the ends make it go. There'll also be a flat merry-go-round allowing a wheelchair to roll up and the occupant can stay in the chair while riding. April is hopeful the new playground can be built in the summer of 2023.
There are some kids out there on a time limit that may never get to see this playground built, and that's not what I want. I want all children to be able to see this playground.
The city of Washington is home to several beautiful parks. April tells us why Comforting Hearts wants the new playground located in Longfellow Park.
They have a lot of children from Davies and Martin counties that have different abilities. And I thought, how great would it be for them to bring their kids here as a field trip one day and let them play with no barriers.
I just want people to know that kids with wheelchairs and all of these disabilities, they can do more than just sit on the sidelines. They can watch and play.
And what does Katie want to play on when the new playground is built?
The teeter-totter, the merry-go-round. I just want to play on everything so I can be happy.
From Vincennes PBS for Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Dave Foster.
And the Yoho General Store in Salisbury had its 10-year renovation milestone December 1st. Our Clayton Baumgarth visited the landmark store in rural Greene County and has this story.
The building itself is 90 years old, and the Yoho General Store has been serving the community for 101 years. CFC Properties, a Cook Group company specializing in property management and historic restoration, purchased the building in 2012 and restored it. Jim Murphy, president of CFC Properties, said that historic places like the Yoho General Store are key to rural areas like Salisbury and should continue to be cared for.
I think it's just really important for the community to have a sense of place. I think that the Yoho Store kind of helps cultivate that community and create that sense of place for them, that this is home for them.
Renovations CFC performed include pouring a new foundation, installing new kitchen equipment, and repairing the floors and walls. They kept parts original, like the bamboo ceiling, potbelly stove, and some memorabilia on the walls. The work seems to have paid off for CFC. Since renovating the store, families and community members have made it a point to come in for a visit and see the historic building for themselves.
It's not just the food that they love, but they just love the nostalgia of the place, the old general store that's been here for 90 years.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
The store is celebrating the anniversary with a Customer Appreciation Week through December 8th that will include specials on meals, pies, and even free homemade cookies. Well, that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.